So I have Teresa, May-Benson here with me. Those who have seen my email, I met Teresa many years ago at her Praxis course in Brisbane, Australia, and connected with her and really wanted to know more about what Teresa had to share around Praxis and the underlying pieces with that. And so you've spent decades at the Spiral Foundation and recently moved to Pennsylvania, is that right? To continue on your, having a grandchild and family. So thank you so much for coming on, avid researcher. I'm so excited to have you on here because I always just learn something every time I speak with you. So thanks so much for taking out and coming on. So I'll jump right in so I don't keep you. I know it's late for you there or get the end of your day. But the first thing I want to ask you is super simple. I just want to hear how you would explain Praxis because it's so complex. So script that a parent or someone wants to know, what is Praxis? How would you explain that in a nutshell?
Believe it or not, I actually run into those kinds of questions all the time on airplanes. Up until COVID, when I was traveling all the time, inevitably, you're sitting there talking to the guy next to you, and it's usually a guy. And they're like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I say, "Well, I'm an occupational therapist, and I work with children with sensory processing, sensory integration problems." And they're like, "What's that?" So I have to describe what's going on. So Praxis is our ability to really be able to do the things that we want to do. All right. It's our ability to adapt to our environment, to meet the environmental demands, and to be able to plan and organize and come up with ideas for our motor actions. And really, in a nutshell, that's what it involves.
Awesome. Thank you. And I guess my next question then would be, how do we see this manifest? So that's quite a fancy, all the things we want to do, but what do you see these kids who we're seeing, how does it look for these guys when they have deficits in Praxis skills or they're struggling with that?
Well, that's a really good question, because depending on what aspect of Praxis is problematic, it can be very obvious or it can be very, very subtle. If you're dealing with a child with motor planning problems, very often these are our clumsy kids. They're awkward, they break things, they don't know how to play. They are often the kids who are following other children. We just find that those are the kids who have difficulties with eating and dressing and sports, and there are kids who maybe are not real athletic, and handwriting problems. So kids with motor planning problems are generally picked up fairly easily because these are the kids who just struggle to do the things we want them to do. On the other hand, children with ideational problems, I really see them as being our sort of silent, missed population that are very misunderstood, because many of these children with ideational problems are considered to be behavior problems. They're impulsive, they are rigid and inflexible because they can't anticipate what's happening in the future. And therefore, they want things done their way. They're very controlling, and they don't have a sense of humor. So you can't even joke with them. And these children, I find, can be really hard to identify sometimes initially, because they often, when they do things, they often can do them okay. Many of them can have adequate motor planning, for instance. And so everybody says, well, they can do their motor coordination skills, but these are the kids who resist doing things, who run away when you ask them to do something, who get upset when you ask them to do something. And they're the ones who get labeled as a behavior problem. And those kids are can be, I think, really misunderstood.
That actually leads us to our next question. So I'm so glad you brought that up, and that difference with that subtlety that we can often miss and then be mislabeled. And so I am going to go on a limb here and just share, I guess, something that I've been meaning to ask you, and I would love to hear. And that is, so often, and just in my experience and, you know, kids I'm seeing, so not a research article, but so often the kids that I am working with who come to me with a diagnosis of particularly oppositional defiance disorder, but even just behavioural challenges in general, so often, or I could almost go as far as to say every time, these kids will have some kind of praxis deficit, particularly around ideation or initiating tasks, and so they position. And so I just wanted to hear what you think and how you would, I guess, explain what I'm seeing, or if you do or don't share what I'm seeing. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do. I totally agree. I feel like I've seen a lot of children with behavior problems or come in who have been labeled as behavior problems, especially around transitions, initiating activities, things like that. The first thing I look for in those children is ideational difficulties. Usually, if there's a motor planning problem, that's kind of been picked up, unless it's pretty subtle and it's more of a bilateral coordination sequencing problem. And frankly, sequencing issues can be a huge problem for these kids. I often see sequencing problems in conjunction with ideation problems because they can't figure out that some idea of how to do things. I'm not a big fan of the oppositional defiant label. I think a lot of our children get labeled with that, and it's unfair to them. Only children can be oppositional defiant, and it's all about them not doing what we want them to do. And that's, for me, kind of a big problem. And so I do feel like many of those kids have praxis-related issues. And if you think about it, it's like, think how you react as an adult when you don't know what's going to happen. You know, when you're in a state of uncertainty in your life, or there's something, you know, going on that you don't know what's going to happen. How do we respond? Well, we respond by being rigid. We respond by being controlling, because we're trying to control things that we can't control. Somebody asks you to do something, what do? You snap back at them, and you get angry because you want to be the one who makes the decision about what to do next. None of those behaviors are unique to us. They're the same thing we see in our kids. And for us, it's a matter of feeling out of control because life is out of control. But for our children, it is because life's out of control, but it's because they can't conceptualize what's happening. It has to do with their own internal systems. And it's really frustrating.
Yeah, it's such a good point about us as adults. So yeah, something new or something changes or something unexpected. I mean, many of us can eventually adapt or can adapt quite quickly, and we have that variation, but we all probably have that same impulse of, okay, then whether or not we have got the ability to be flexible or not. And yeah, and depending on our day and how busy it was and how stressed we are and whatever else was already there, and our kids who have this stuff have that existing for them all of the time or a lot of the time. So that's I really wanted to hear your thoughts on that, because I see it all the time, and I've actually been meaning to talk to you about it in general, particularly with the oppositional defiance disorder diagnosis. So I just wanted to, I guess, bring up probably another can of worms, so I won't make you go too far in depth, and we can definitely talk about it more at brunch. But around, I guess, with Praxis, in order to have good praxis development and skills, it's an integration and intertwining of so many other things. Our center integration, our looking back to your course, reflex integration, our experiences with our caregivers and others, our opportunities to play and to explore, you know, all of these experiences that build up, and they are definitely not cognitive in that way. And so I did want to ask, and I don't want to do the debate top down versus bottom up, but I did want to say that we often see some of these skills taught via cognitive strategies. And I wondered just your thoughts on that, not necessarily the debate, but just what's your thought, because it is to get to that level, we do have to have this myriad of things just come together. So could you share on that?
Yeah, so here's the thing. Top-down strategies are good around motor skills for teaching specific kinds of skills. And there's nothing wrong with them. That's how we learn how to ride a bike. It's how we learn how to tie our shoes. We learn how to do specific skill sets because we cognitively are taught how to do them. And I'm getting back into bobbin lace making, which I did years ago, haven't done for a long, long time. And believe me, it's like totally cognitive at this point. And it's like, okay, where's my book, right? About how do I do this? So it's very cognitive, but for Praxis is about being able to adaptively meet demands of our world in the moment. Okay, it's not specifically about skill development. Although we use our skill development as a way of meeting some of our adaptive demands, but it's not the only way. And we have to have motor engrams and neuronal models in our brain that are very diverse in order to be able to easily and adaptively meet these demands of our world. If you have a very limited repertoire, then you're not going to be able to easily meet these demands. It doesn't mean you won't be able to do it. It's just not going to be as easy. And so cognitive strategies, top-down approaches, tend to develop very limited repertoires. Okay, they're really for these more discrete skills. However, when we're doing, say, bottom-up intervention like SI, we're working on developing adaptive behaviors, the ability to take all these diverse experiences and to apply them in the moment, and to develop at the same time a library or a repertoire of diverse experiences to draw upon for the future. Yeah. And so, I think that there is and not only that, but there is a place for top-down strategies to support our in the moment bottom-up interventions. So we actually need to and should, especially for ideational abilities, use top-down prompting strategies and some top-down strategies in the moment while the child is doing the bottom-up activity. So it's like really blending the two to be the most effective. I think where we really run into problems is when we separate them and we're trying to do one or the other. It's really when we can blend them together that we can be most effective.
And I'd probably even go, and you can correct me because that's fine, but I guess if we look at that whole body, mind, spirit, and that's what I was saying, there's that intertwining, there's that emotion piece too around attached to the activity and the interaction with whoever you're doing that with, that then again helps for you to embody and support that again. So that's what I guess I meant with the question is those three things have to be just functioning all together so often. Yeah, such a great explanation. And I've already kept you a little over than what I had asked of you. So I am going to answer your questions now, but I'm so grateful to coming in. And you did mention earlier that you have been doing, I'm assuming because of COVID as well, as many of our mentors are doing, but you're doing a lot more mentoring and teaching nationally via Zoom. So if you want to share a little bit about just what you're up to there, and I guess I know that you're still treating, which we spoke about as well. So I'd just love to hear what you're up to and how people could reach you if they're wanting some more support around this kind of thing.
Sure. The best way to get hold of me to start with is through either Facebook or Instagram, or you can email me at tmb@tmbeducation.com. And follow my Instagram and Facebook pages for TMB Education. That's where I post all of my course activities. you're welcome to follow my personal stuff, but my personal Instagram is all about my cats and my tea and, you know, my knitting and all of that fun stuff. You won't learn anything about my courses there. But in any case, yeah, so through TMB Education, I'm doing a lot of international and in the US mentoring. I'm available to make arrangements to do that. Oftentimes people are having specific clients come in and we watch their treatment and I give feedback during their sessions, and it's a way to make that affordable for them by having the families cover the cost of the consultation. And it helps the child, it helps the therapist. Lots of courses coming up in various and sundry places. I've got a pretty busy fall starting in October. I do have a course coming up next month in about 3 weeks. I'm really excited about. My colleague and I, Wilma Dorman, we are going to be doing a course on social competency and developing social competency and sensory integration using a group intervention model that Wilma developed and we've expanded upon. So it's a really great sort of next step for us occupational therapists to take SI and sensory motor activities and groups into that social emotional realm that I think is so important. So that's coming through Chile. It will be in English as well as Spanish. So I'm really excited about that. So lots of stuff coming up.
And you said you know, I won't go into now, but you said, you know, you're doing some work at the university and you've got so much going on. And that social piece, and I didn't sort of bring it up today because, you know, it could go forever, and I really will be talking about that in our brunch, because the social piece is where we see, because that's the
well, Praxis is social.
Right, and that's the big meaning, is to be able to play with your mates and interact, and that's human behavior. So that's where I see often the cognitive piece breaks down a little, but we will dive right into that. Right before you go, I said, like I said before, you're doing, you're still treating and you're doing all these new things and you're continuing to evolve. It's after decades of practice. One sentence, what would you tell new graduate Teresa from experienced, amazing, down the track Teresa?
About, what would I tell them about what? Because
being an OT, working with kids, anything. What's one thing you just think, oh, I'm telling new grad Teresa this?
Oh, God. So many things I could say, but I think the main thing is I love being an occupational therapist. I absolutely think it is the best job in the world. And whenever somebody says they don't like occupational therapy, didn't like being an OT, I just think you must have had the wrong job, because, you know, find a new place to work. Because what can be better than OT? I mean, we work with all populations. We can work in almost any practice setting. Our job opportunities are endless. You know, from private practice to hospitals, to schools, to industry and mental health. I mean, you name it, there's a place to go. You can find something you love to do in OT. And so I guess I would go back, and I was set to be an OT from the time I was a senior in high school. So I guess I wouldn't tell my old self that, but I'd probably tell her you made the right choice and it's a great occupation.
Thank you so much. Who would have thought that would have been the question of all four that stumped you for a moment? Questions. Thanks again, Teresa. It was so good to have you on. I always love talking to you and hearing them, and yeah, I really enjoy it. So thank you again, and see you. I think it's next week.
All right. That's good. It's good to see everybody. Bye.
Again, bye.